Zarvox chuckled so hard his glass of plasma wine slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Across the war table, General Meldrin was nearly in tears, wiping a smear of green ichor from his face as he cackled. They called martial law. On Earth. On themselves. Laughter rolled through the war hall theta, echoing off cold metal walls and polished chrome fixtures. Outside the viewports, a swirling curtain of distant stars blinked idly in deep space, as if watching in silent judgment. None of them cared. Earth, to them, was a backwater dust ball of tribal warlords playing soldier. And now those warlords had declared martial law. What are they going to do? Scoffed General Chiva. Deploy their ancient tanks? Launch broomsticks at our fleets? Another round of laughter exploded around the table. This wasn't war. This was a sitcom. But then, the room dimmed. The holographic map above the table flickered, glitching once, then stabilized into a red-highlighted projection of Earth. The room fell silent. A single number blinked at the bottom of the projection. It read, Confirmed hostile kills 3. A small frown tugged at Zarvox's face. Which unit? He asked. The system didn't respond. Then the number changed. It went from 3 to 12. Then 47. Then 103. By the time the number hit 900, no one was laughing. The Galactic Union's pride in its military supremacy had never been challenged by a single planet, let alone one that still used gasoline and television ads. Earth's resistance was supposed to be a brief note in the Union's conquest log, something to skim over in post-war strategy reviews. They had sent no major force, just a few recon ships to test Earth's compliance. It was a formality. Instead, those ships had gone dark within an hour of entering atmosphere. The only signal that came through was a distorted broadcast from Earth's old calm frequencies. It showed a battlefield strewn with burning wreckage, twisted metal, and limp, alien bodies. In the center stood a human figure in matte black body armor. No insignia. No unit tag. Just a single number spray-painted on his chest, K0. Zarvox leaned forward in his chair. That's not a military unit. That's a designation. Meldrin narrowed his eyes. For what? A weapon? A drone? Chiver was already scrolling through the Galactic Intelligence Archive, his clawed fingers jittering with frustration. There's nothing under K0. Nothing recent. Nothing at all. Earth, in their final pre-blackout transmission to the Galactic Council, had made their position clear. The message was simple. Do not enter Earth's territory. Martial law is active. Any incursion will be met with permanent force. The message ended with a text-only footer. It read, You do not understand what that means. Yet. The next batch of dropships was authorized within minutes. Zarvox had scoffed at the idea of hesitation. We are not the type to be intimidated by a planet with no central command. Send another 10. A larger sweep. If one human killed 100, we'll send 100 to kill one. The new strike team had the best AI-driven gear, satellite-linked targeting, anti-kinetic shielding. They landed near what Earth used to call Montana. The Union watched the feed from their helmets in real time. There were forests, quiet snowdrifts, the flicker of abandoned military outposts. Then the feed went black. One by one. Helmet cam after helmet cam dropped into static. No gunfire. No alerts. Just silence. Until one cam, disconnected from the squad, turned back on. It showed a soldier crawling backward through the snow, blood trailing behind him, his eyes wide with terror. He's not human, the soldier whispered before a shadow passed over the camera. The last frame caught a boot stepping into view. The same one marked K0. Panic wasn't allowed in the Union's war hall. But confusion was allowed. Doubt even. Meldrin stood frozen, watching the casualty count reach 204 in under 2 Earth hours. We should have gotten footage, he hissed. Anything. Thermal scans. Drone logs. This makes no sense. But the satellites weren't working. Earth's orbital sensors were still online. Somehow, Earth was jamming Union frequencies with tech they shouldn't have possessed. Then came the second message. No visuals this time. Just audio. A human voice, steady and deliberate. This is Kill Order Zero. You've entered secured territory. You've ignored planetary law. All violators will be processed. You have 1 hour to evacuate orbit. There was no emotion. No warning shot. Just that steady, empty tone, like someone reading a weather report about your death. Zarvox laughed again, but it was shorter this time. Kill Order Zero. They think that'll scare us? The war room fell into silence again as the AI system dinged. A new line of text appeared below the kill count. It now read, Kill Authority Confirmed, Agent K0. Then a footnote, Clearance Level Unknown. Meldrin stared at it, his gills twitching. Who is K0? A long, painful silence followed. Chiver looked at Zarvox, then at Meldrin, then down at his own claws. I don't think he's new. I think he's old. Old enough they erased him. That single sentence drained the color from Zarvox's face. The generals called in their black site historian, a cynical, half-senile creature named Trell. He'd served as a sub-command analyst during the early phases of Earth observation. When he saw the K0 footage, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he croaked. That's not a code. That's a sentence. Zarvox frowned. What kind of sentence? Trell nodded slowly. Kill Order Zero. It's not for defense. It's punishment. That's the man they send when something needs to be wiped off the map so thoroughly it forgets it existed. Meldrin snorted. You're telling me Earth built this? Trell shook his head. No. Earth didn't build him. Earth unleashed him. At this point, paranoia started taking root. The generals rechecked their own security clearances, reviewed their ship integrity, and quadruple verified fleet protocols. Still, the kill count climbed. Quietly. Persistently. Each new number registered within Earth's atmosphere meant another Union soldier, scout, or officer eliminated. Not captured. Not disabled. Eliminated. The strike teams had stopped reporting in. Entire communication lines had gone dark. Satellite logs showed faint signs of movement through Earth's highlands, shadowy figures ducking through trees, vanishing into blizzards. They didn't seem like squads. They seemed like ghosts. But the kill logs all pointed to one author. At precisely the 900th confirmed kill, Earth sent one more signal. A single still image. The war hall received it without decryption, no effort to block it. It was almost an invitation. The image showed a wide shot of Earth's surface from orbit. At the center, a crater glowed faintly in the snow. Standing in the middle, looking up, was the same figure. His armor now bore dozens of scratches, one alien blade embedded in his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. And painted beneath him in the snow were the words, Martial Law Active. In that moment, the laughing stopped forever. The war room no longer echoed with laughter. The red glow of the kill count bathed the generals' faces as they sat in tense silence, each too proud to be the first to admit unease. The number on the screen no longer blinked erratically. It now moved with grim consistency. One by one, hostiles were marked as neutralized, and each line carried the same haunting signature, K0. It wasn't just the number that troubled them. It was the pattern. No backup. No support fire. No perimeter alarms. The kills weren't made by an army. They were surgical. Intentional. As if a phantom moved across Earth's landscape with a ledger and a list. Chiver leaned in and finally said what no one else dared. He asked, quietly, almost childlike, what if it's not one of their soldiers? What if K0 is something else? The room turned to the Warnet historian again. Trell, now shaking from a combination of age and tension, scrolled through archaic Terran files that had long been deemed irrelevant. Most of Earth's pre-integration history had been glossed over. Too fractured. Too illogical. But now Trell dove deep, sifting through Cold War projects, abandoned black site codenames, and encrypted military doctrine left buried in obsolete formats. One file refused to open without triple-layer manual authorization. Once it did, Trow didn't speak. He only turned the screen toward the generals. It displayed a single phrase in Old Earth military shorthand: if K0 is activated, protocol override is in effect. Non-human contact advised to evacuate planetary orbit. Probability of return, 0%. Zarvok stared at the screen and clenched his mandibles. This is theater. Propaganda. Earth is projecting fear to avoid full-scale invasion. Meldrin wasn't so sure. That's a lot of theater for one man to write in blood. They summoned a Union tactician who had served as planetary envoy to Earth years before the blackout. The man walked in slowly, his face pale. When they asked him about K0, he didn't speak right away. He looked down at the table, whispered, "I heard stories from their own soldiers. They never talked about him with rank. They didn't call him Sir or Commander. They just called him the Stopper." Zarvok scoffed. "Stopper of what?" The envoy finally looked up and said, "Whatever gets out of hand." Meanwhile, Earth's broadcast satellites continued transmitting low-band signals into Union space. Most were harmless. Static patterns. Weather logs. Strange bursts of white noise. But one transmission carried a distorted file that the Union's AI struggled to decrypt. It eventually resolved into a video. Grainy. Old. It showed a group of Terran soldiers sitting around a dim-lit mess hall. They were laughing. Loud. Jovial. One soldier got up to retrieve a drink and bumped into someone off camera. The entire table went silent. The camera adjusted slightly. The figure that had entered the frame was wearing the same matte black armor with the red K0 mark on his chest. He said nothing. Just stood there. The laughter didn't resume. One soldier, trying to lighten the mood, asked, "You ever blink, K?" The man didn't answer. He simply stared. The file ended a moment later. Trowell didn't bother explaining. They feared him too. The more the Union tried to understand Earth's martial law structure, the stranger it became. It wasn't organized like a planetary military. Earth had scattered command nodes, autonomous enforcement units, and most shockingly, local authorization to engage galactic forces independently. This wasn't centralized warfare. It was designed chaos, built to confuse and bury intruders under layers of misdirection and environmental advantage. Meldrin grunted. "They don't fight like a planet. They fight like a hunted species." And then he paused. "Or like predators pretending to be prey." As the generals deliberated next steps, they were interrupted by an emergency alert. A fleet of supply cruisers sent to establish a temporary command post over Earth's southern pole had gone dark. All of them. Simultaneously. No crash beacons. No hull breach warnings. Just silence. Within minutes, Earth's low-orbit satellites began broadcasting one image across all Union military frequencies: a single cruiser slowly falling from orbit, burning in the upper atmosphere, spiraling like a dead bird. Across its hull, faintly visible through the flames, someone had spray-painted a phrase in Terran script: "Eyes up." Union forces scrambled to triangulate the origin of the hack, but every trace led to rerouted ghost signals bouncing between defunct satellites. It was as if K0 had become part of Earth's grid. Meldrin slammed his claw against the table. "This is psychological warfare. We need boots on the ground. Not recon. Not probes. Send a full brigade. Clean sweep." Chiver nodded in agreement but hesitated. "How do we know where to send them? The feeds are silent. The terrain is wild. And this K0 is everywhere and nowhere." Zarvok's authorized Operation Deep Silence, a coordinated strike involving 12 planetary drops, each focused on high-altitude regions believed to be K0's roaming zones. Each team included bioscan drones, suppression units, and high-grade plasma artillery. They were told not to engage unless they had a confirmed kill shot. 3 hours after deployment, all communication with the teams ceased. There were no distress signals. No reports. Just silence. The only clue came when one recon drone sent its final visual feed. It showed a mountain ridge with an empty Union helmet placed on a spike. Tied to it was a scroll. When the drone zoomed in, it read, 12 isn't enough. The Union Council demanded answers. Why hadn't Earth been subdued yet? Why was one operative able to destabilize multiple military branches without formal battles? The generals scrambled to contain panic. They issued a classified memo declaring Earth's resistance a temporary anomaly. Internally, however, they began to question whether this resistance was truly human in nature. Trell, reviewing the oldest files in Union records, found one line that had been sealed in a red flag vault for over a century. The file was labeled Project Dustwalker. The entry simply stated, terminated subject reactivated. Earth has invoked Clause 0. Zarvok stared at the phrase as if it were written in blood. He turned to Chiver and demanded, how long before reinforcements arrive? Chiver didn't answer. Meldrin looked up instead and said, reinforcements? From who? We're the reinforcements. This was supposed to be cleanup. And we're the ones being buried. Back on Earth, in the quiet of a snow-covered hill, a figure stood watching the stars. No comm link. No backup. No orders. Just a ledger in his hand and names to cross out. The snow around him was red. The night behind him was still. His radio crackled once. A voice from the Union side whispered, what do you want? The reply was nearly inaudible. Compliance. Or silence. Then the signal cut. In the war hall, the generals now looked not at the Earth but at one another, wondering which of them would be the next name on a list they didn't know existed. The kill count updated again. No sound. No alert. Just a quiet number turning over like a clock. The war, they realized, wasn't about territory anymore. It was about fear. Earth hadn't declared martial law to protect its people. It had declared it to release something they'd once locked away. And now it was free. Zarvox had never seen a general sweat before. Not in the war hall. Not under Union banners. But as the lights dimmed and the third orbital strike team vanished off the grid, even the most battle-hardened officers were beginning to shift in their seats. Meldrin had stopped sneering entirely. His hands no longer rested confidently on the table. Instead, they hovered slightly above it, tense, as if expecting something to explode. The kill count now stood at over 1,200 confirmed units lost. There were no confirmed enemy units. Only one. And the more they tried to track him, the more elusive he became. Every protocol they executed, every scan they ran, every contingency plan they launched, somehow, ended with nothing but static, debris, or worse, personalized responses. The last destroyed squad had a message carved into their own shuttle's hull with what appeared to be a jagged combat knife. It read, keep counting. Zarvox launched Operation Iron Net that same day. The concept was simple in design but massive in execution. They would deploy 300 stealth-capable drones in Earth's orbit, construct a complete heat grid overlay, and triangulate all non-civilian energy movement from surface to stratosphere. In theory, nothing could move without detection. 2 orbital destroyers and a fleet of sensor ships were assigned to the net. Chiver, obsessed with tracking this one anomaly, had handpicked every pilot, every engineer, every drone commander. If K0 made so much as a campfire, they would see it. They didn't get a campfire. They got an open door. 12 hours into the operation, a single drone feed began glitching. It was a reconnaissance model orbiting low over North America. Its visual feed turned white, then green, then blinked back to normal. Before command could flag the corruption, the drone dropped from orbit and crash-landed into one of the Union's own sensor relays. The explosion wasn't large, but it severed 3 key data nodes from the tracking system. Zarvox ordered a manual override, demanding all drone AIs report to Central Command. Only one responded. That drone sent a single data packet, which appeared at first to be encrypted coordinates. When decrypted, the message read, I am already inside. The feed cut from all 300 drones at once. Meldrin screamed at the technicians. Chiva accused sabotage. Zarvox remained silent, reviewing every system access point personally. And that's when he found it. Not a virus. Not a worm. A login. Someone had entered the primary drone control system using a rank that shouldn't exist. Authority Code Zeta Prime. A designation reserved for the original architects of the Union's internal command web. It hadn't been used in nearly 200 years. No known personnel carried that rank. But the terminal log was clear. Zeta Prime had entered the system, disabled overrides, rerouted control protocols, and then erased itself. Zarvox asked Trowel what he knew about Zeta Prime. Trowel didn't answer. He just stared at the terminal and whispered, "He's been here before." While Union leadership tried to contain the breach, a new transmission came from the K0 protocol. Not a threat. Not a warning. A feed. It showed Union soldiers stationed at an abandoned Earth Command bunker in the Arctic. They were patrolling the corridor, weapons drawn, sensors sweeping. Then the lights cut. The footage went infrared. One by one, their body temperatures vanished from the screen like candles being snuffed out. The last soldier, breathing heavily, whispered into his comm, "I can't hear anything." Even the snow stopped. Then his thermal signature faded, and the screen went black. Below the footage, one word appeared. Reset. Chiver demanded immediate retaliation. He pushed to initiate the erasure directive, a rarely used protocol designed for planetary cleansing, high-atmosphere ion storm deployment followed by orbital plasma bombardment. Zarvox considered it but hesitated. Earth wasn't just any planet. It was still under Legacy Treaty observation. A full-scale cleansing would attract attention from the fringe races. Worse, if K0 had really infiltrated Union systems, he might have access to off-world triggers. He might not even be on Earth anymore. That question alone was terrifying enough to stall the directive. And then came the strangest breach of all. An AI assistant inside the Union flagship destroyer began answering questions before officers asked them. One technician asked for satellite position logs, and the system answered, "Already filed, Commander Tuvok." Tuvok hadn't spoken yet. Another requested access to old Earth troop movement maps, and the AI replied, "Useless to you, but I'll show you anyway." Meldrin shut the system down manually. When they opened the logs, they saw the same phrase repeated in the system memory. K0 was here. Panic gave way to breakdown. Meldrin accused Chiver of leaking codes. Chiver called for a military tribunal. Zarvox intervened, not with protocol, but with an order. He said, "We find him? Not with AI. Not with drones. We go to the ground. Personally." The other generals froze. Zarvox repeated, "We go down there. Because he's not hiding. He's baiting us. The bait works. Let's see what's in the trap." Union Command authorized a 3-general descent to Earth's surface, surrounded by 200 elite sentries, 20 armored transports, and 5 full recon skiffs. Their landing zone was chosen not for safety, but for precision, a canyon in the rocky terrain identified as the epicenter of K0's first recorded engagement. As they descended, the canyon was quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No wildlife. Just snow, stones, and the eerie hum of engines slicing the atmosphere. They touched down without resistance. Troops spread out, scanning ridge lines, deploying seismic sensors, heat detectors, bio-trackers. Nothing. It was as if the canyon had been carved out of the world and left hollow. But inside one of the transport crafts, Chiver found something odd. A note. Not digital. Handwritten. A sheet of thin earth paper placed neatly on a seat. It read, "Thanks for coming down. Saves me the walk." Before anyone could react, every skiff exploded simultaneously. The blast didn't kill the generals, but it disabled all long-range communication. Static filled their earpieces. Troops scrambled. Chaos broke out. In the fog of smoke, shapes moved. Not soldiers. Not machines. Just shadows. Some officers fired. Others froze. The 3 generals regrouped in the wreckage of the main transport. Blood soaked the snow outside. Meldrin's voice shook for the first time in decades. He said he knew. He knew we'd come. Zarvox simply looked up at the cliffside. A single figure stood there. Still. Watching. Red glint on the chest. K0. He didn't move. He didn't raise a weapon. He simply turned, walked away, and vanished into the smoke. When emergency evac finally arrived 2 hours later, they recovered less than 40 soldiers. All shaken. Some unresponsive. One had carved the words "he sees everything" into the inside of his own helmet. Back aboard the flagship, as the three generals debriefed in silence, Zarvox played the canyon footage again. And again. He paused on one frame, zoomed in. K0's face was visible beneath the cracked visor. Just for a second. A human face. Calm. Focused. But the eyes didn't look back at the camera like a soldier. They looked through it. Past it. As if he knew who would be watching. And for the first time, Zarvox whispered something he'd never said in any war before. "I don't think we're the ones fighting this war. I think we're the ones being judged." The upper chamber of War Hall Theta had gone dark. Not by power failure or design, but by necessity. The generals no longer trusted the screens. Every time they lit up, it seemed to bring bad news or worse, no explanation at all. Zarvox stood at the far end of the hall, staring at the projection of Earth spinning slowly on its axis. The latest casualty reports had come in. Another 89 soldiers. 5 recon teams. 3 stealth interceptors. All gone without trace. No black boxes. No flare signals. Not even wreckage. It was as if Earth itself had begun consuming the invaders. Meldrin stood beside him, quiet for once, his claws tapping nervously against his belt. Chiver didn't show up. He hadn't left his personal quarters since the canyon ambush. A med drone had been posted outside his door, and no one asked questions. Everyone knew why. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the Union's High Council had ordered a data raid on Earth's defense archives. They used a deep space comm relay to brute force past the digital firewalls Earth had raised. For a few minutes it worked. Files streamed in. Partial logs, old recordings, fragments of dossiers. Most of them were useless. But one file caught Trow's attention. It had no title. No keywords. It was a camera feed from inside a rural Earth building, stone walls, wooden beams, barely lit. The footage was from a drone, hidden and silent, recording through a cracked window. Inside the room was a man sitting in a chair with his back to the camera. No movement. No noise. Just him. And on the wall opposite him, hundreds of weapons. All human. Outdated. But polished. Maintained. The drone zoomed slightly. There was writing carved into the stone beside him. Earth law is not dead. It waits. That location was traced to an area known only through human folklore. A place locals referred to as the farm. Not a literal one. Not really. Just a remote landmass deep in the Yukon, miles from the nearest relay. The transmission had been stored in a military satellite, dormant since Earth's last civil war. No active command structure tied to it. No current activity. Yet it had power. And someone had uploaded the footage manually only hours before the drone's capture. The decision was made without a vote. They had to go there. A specialist strike team was assembled. Not soldiers. Not anymore. The generals chose intelligence officers, infiltration experts, exo-trackers, silent movers. None of them wore standard armor. No comm signals. Just analog gear, maps, and old Earth firearms. Every team member had one order: locate the building, observe the occupant, confirm if it was K0. Do not engage. Do not signal. Do not approach. Observe and report. They left within the hour. The generals waited in silence, reviewing old footage again and again, hoping to find some pattern they missed. They didn't. The team reached the coordinates after a 20-mile approach on foot. No vehicles. No lights. They used cloud cover and thick forests to mask their path. What they found, at first, didn't look like a base. It looked like a cabin. Simple. Silent. A barn leaned beside it, partially collapsed. A fence of wood and wire surrounded the area, the posts half buried in snow. A dog bowl sat on the porch, empty. One operative crept close enough to peek through a window. Inside was the man. Same position. Same stillness. He had not moved. A fire burned faintly behind him. No comm signals. No alarms. Just that eerie stillness. The team withdrew. On their hike back, the trail behind them vanished. Not from wind. Not from snow. The path they had used was gone, as if the forest had healed itself. They made it halfway before someone noticed their maps no longer matched their position. Trees they had marked were gone. Paths they had memorized bent in the wrong direction. One operative looked up and froze. The stars above them were wrong. No constellations matched their guides. They tried to activate emergency beacons. No signal. No satellite response. One officer finally radioed command and said, "We're not on any map anymore." Back in orbit, a new Earth broadcast began without warning. No audio. Just a feed. It showed the same barn. But this time, from inside. The camera panned slowly across the room. It passed over old human medals, faded photographs, weapons from 100 wars. Then it reached the man. He turned. Slowly. Just enough to show his face. The eyes were human. The expression was calm. But behind him, scrawled across the wall in old Terran ink, was a list. Not of targets. But of memories. Entire cities. Conflicts. Names. Not victories. Mistakes. Wounds. And next to each name was a single slash. Erased. At the bottom of the list, in bold red ink, were the words "I do not forget." The Union commanders ordered immediate extraction of the strike team. But the coordinates no longer worked. The terrain beneath them no longer registered. Drones dispatched to the area vanished on entry. One returned. Just one. It dropped into orbit weeks later, scorched and cracked. Inside was a single note on old Earth paper. It read, "You asked me to fight monsters. You never asked me what happened after." Zarvox refused to sleep. Meldrin resigned from field operations. Chiva locked himself in again. Trell didn't speak anymore. He just sat in the corner of the war room, staring at old footage, as if waiting for something to change. The Union Council demanded a full ceasefire. But Earth didn't respond. Not officially. Instead, they began sending out wideband signals across the galaxy. Messages not in threat, but in warning. Do not approach Earth. Martial law remains active. K0 is still deployed. Peace attempts will not be acknowledged unless conditions are met. One of those conditions was strange. The Union had to release the full file history of their pre-contact dealings with Earth, especially regarding recruitment programs and test subjects. The demand made no sense. Earth never had the authority to request such disclosure. But when the Union refused, another ship fell from orbit. Not destroyed. Not burned. Just landed. Crashed perfectly into the sea, exactly 2 miles from Earth's largest neutral territory port. Inside the vessel were no bodies. Just empty armor. And one black flag. No words. No logo. Just the number 0 stitched in the center. Earth's representatives claimed no knowledge. Their political leaders hadn't spoken publicly in months. The president's last transmission had been weeks ago. It ended with a short phrase that now haunted everyone who heard it. Martial law is not for war. It's for remembrance. The generals sat one last time in the war hall and faced the projection again. The Earth still spun slowly, silently. But now the kill count had stopped. Not because the fighting had ended, but because there was no longer anything to count. Just space between the Union's memory of control and the new reality that Earth didn't need an army. They needed only one man who remembered everything they had tried to forget. The orbit above Earth had become a graveyard. Union ships that once floated in perfect alignment now drifted aimlessly, some scarred by internal fires, others completely gutted from the inside without a single hull breach. Satellites had gone silent. Beacons pulsed warnings that no one acknowledged. The Union fleet was still physically present, but command had collapsed. No more orders came from the central relay. It was no longer war. It was unraveling. The last orbital destroyer, still fully operational, Vrax Dominion, had issued an emergency standby protocol across all Union military channels. It called for a total recall of all off-world personnel, avoidance of Earth territory, and strict denial of further engagement. It was the most humiliating directive in the Union's history. But none dared to oppose it. Inside Vrax Dominion, General Zarvok stood before the final transmission received from Earth. It hadn't come through radio waves or encryption. It was left on the bridge of the ship itself. A piece of black cloth placed on the command console, stitched with the same red insignia as always. K0. No explanation of how it got there. No record of who placed it. The ship's internal cameras had gone dark for exactly 4 seconds at the same time across all decks. When they returned, the cloth was there. That was all. Meldrin, once proud and relentless, had stepped down from active leadership. He now sat at the back of the room, staring at nothing. He hadn't spoken in hours. Chiver never reappeared. His quarters were sealed from the inside. The only sound heard from his room had been a single phrase whispered over and over again. He was already here. There were no more troops to send. No more strategies left to try. Everything had been tested. Every protocol deployed. And still, it had all led back to one man. No, not a man. Not anymore. Something else. Something crafted by time, trauma, and silence. K0 had no army, no nation, no flag. He had only one directive. Kill Order Zero. And it hadn't been activated by Earth out of desperation. It had been preserved, protected, buried until the stars above them became a threat. He wasn't a weapon. He was an answer. One the Union had never wanted to hear. And then, without warning, he spoke. A broadcast, universal and clear, cut through all channels. Not encrypted. Not hidden. Just there, playing across every bridge, every ship, every listening station within 1,000 systems. A human voice. Calm. Familiar now. The same one they'd heard before, in static, in threats, in footage. But this time, there was no threat in his tone. Only finality. I am not a hero. I am not a soldier. I am what comes after warnings are ignored. Earth's law was not made to be understood by outsiders. It was made to be obeyed. You were warned. You crossed. And now your lesson is written in steel and flame. Zarvox didn't move. Meldrin looked like he might finally scream but couldn't find the breath. The voice continued. I was told to protect what could not be replaced. And when you burned that trust, I did not fight you with armies. I reminded you what silence sounds like. Then the feed ended. No fanfare. No visual. Just dead air. In the hours that followed, the Union began an emergency meeting of all remaining high command. Remote connections from distant systems lit up in confused chatter. Leaders demanded clarification, action, anything to recover standing. But what they got was a message from the Inner Council, classified, red-flagged, urgent. One file. One line. Confirmed location breach. Sector Prime. Internal system. Subject K0. He had left Earth. Or perhaps, he had never been confined to it. Perhaps the entire time he had been moving between the cracks in their systems, living as a signal, a whisper, a pattern too complex for their machines to identify. All along, he had been watching. Waiting. Not for war. But for understanding. And they had failed that test spectacularly. The internal systems of Vrax Dominion began to fail, one by one. Not with fire. Not with explosions. Just quiet shutdowns. Deck by deck the lights dimmed. The oxygen system stayed functional. Gravity remained intact. But the ship was no longer theirs. One final broadcast flickered to life on the main bridge display. No sound. No movement. Just a still image of Earth's moon. On its surface, a small structure had been built. It hadn't been there before. It was new. The image zoomed in slowly, revealing a figure sitting on a metal chair, helmet off, looking up at the stars. K0. Next to him, a wall made of white stone, engraved with hundreds of names. Not alien. All human. Soldiers, civilians, diplomats. All dead in previous wars. The ones the Union never acknowledged. The ones they called acceptable losses. Zarvox lowered his head. The truth struck him not like a weapon but like shame. They had never tried to understand Earth. They had only tried to conquer it. They had seen one species instead of billions of stories. They had measured Earth by its power, not its pain. And now they had paid the price. Not in war, but in memory. For the first time since the beginning of the conflict, Zarvox sent a message to Earth. Not through command channels. Not through military wires. A personal message. Short. I understand now. We were never prepared. I was never prepared. What happens now? There was no reply. Not for days. Then a single data package arrived. Encrypted in Earth's oldest military cipher. Once decrypted, it showed a message written on parchment. Scanned, folded, marked. The message read: Martial law rescinded. Lesson complete. But remember this. I am not your enemy. I am your echo. The screen went dark. Back in the war hall, what remained of Union leadership gathered one final time. They didn't speak of war plans. They didn't talk of retaliation. They discussed treaties, observation reforms, and the inclusion of Earth into protected status. But even as they voted and processed new doctrine, they knew one thing had changed forever. The myth of Union dominance had ended. And the legend of Earth's silent soldier had begun. K0 had become something more than a designation. More than a man. He had become the proof that one being, armed with resolve, memory, and unbearable silence, could bring an empire to its knees without ever raising his voice. And so he vanished. No more broadcasts. No more images. No more kill counts. Only silence. And the memory of what happened when Earth decided to remember.